Your episode. So for people who haven't listened, this is episode 2 on season 3, has
Oh,
been one of the top. Well, right now we're in season 4, but your episode about sleeping in separate rooms has been one of the top downloaded episodes.
wow.
And that is because people are like, we just need to know, is it okay? Can we do this? And yeah, I just really want to say thank you for that conversation because I know I got so many messages saying thank you so much for normalizing this experience.
I think people feel like shame, embarrassed. They don't tell other people because they worry what other people are going to think. But then when you put it out there just in a casual way, like I do, you see comments roll in that's like, me too, me too. Oh
Me
my God, me
too.
too. Yeah,
Me too.
exactly.
Okay, so let me have this Me Too moment with you, and which is our conversation today. And I think it's a really specific piece around the mental load that sometimes people don't even identify what it is. And then also, I don't think our partners understand it. So this is your pancake gate.
Okay.
And I remember seeing, I don't know if it was a reel, I can't remember what it was, but you're talking about why you didn't want your husband to make pancakes on
On
Saturday,
Saturday morning.
on Saturday morning. And I remember being like, me too.
Yeah.
Do you want to give the like short of it?
I'll give the context of where I was at during that time.
Yes.
So this was during quarantine where this all kind of came about, which is where a lot of what I talk about and situations and the examples that I give are from quarantine. Because in my mind, during quarantine, I was basically a stay-at-home mom. My husband was working outside of the house because he's a physician, and I was home with Milo. He was 18 months old all day. I
Which
had the
also,
added,
too, just acknowledging where you were in your world even before that. Like you had just finished your dissertation, you defended your
yeah,
dissertation 3 days before the world shut down. He
he
was
was
in
in
daycare.
daycare.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it was like I had a
A
different
180.
life completely. So the reason I'm so passionate about a lot of these topics is because I think it's so generalizable to so many stay-at-home moms, and I just feel for them because for the most part people are like, I can't, not like complain, but I can't basically say, for example, with the pancakes, I can't say I don't want you to make pancakes because what that's implying is that I don't want to do the childcare anymore. And like, oh, like moms can't say that, like you want to break from doing childcare or like you don't want to be next to your child. Like, what's wrong with you?
Right. It's
So,
this like inherent script and messaging that women receive that you should always want to be with your children and not always beside them, but that you should also be joyful and happy and
yeah,
loving every moment.
exactly. So, what would happen during quarantine? My husband would work during the week. I was home with Milo. And then all of a sudden, Saturday morning rolls around. And I'm like, yes, like finally, I have another adult. Like, my husband's going to be home. Like, things are looking up. Like, my day is going to be completely different from the Monday to the Friday, but it wasn't because we would wake up, come downstairs, have coffee for like 5 minutes, and then my husband would get up and start doing stuff around the house, whether that be making pancakes, going downstairs and putting laundry in, going in the garage, doing recycling. And in my mind, I'm sitting there irritated now and I'm annoyed. And I'm like, okay, Renee, like let's try and understand why you're feeling this way because on paper he's doing really good things. you know
Mm,
I always get met with like, oh my God, I wish my husband would make
yes.
pancakes, I wish, and it's like
Let's not
that's
do the
not the point.
comparative. Yeah, let's not do the comparative suffering, right? Everybody has their different experiences.
Yeah.
And
And
you in that moment, which I can relate to that. I'll tell you my own version of the pancake one after, but this is that moment where it's like, what just happened? Where did my co-parent go? And how did I end up being parent A?
mhm, yeah, default parent, like,
Default, she felt. Yeah.
yeah. So we had a conversation about it and then it was a non-issue, but in his mind, like he didn't understand, you know but really when you're doing childcare tasks basically 24/7 Monday to Friday, on Saturday, it would be nice if you could do something else, you know? For example, I just wanted to sit there and have a coffee. Maybe my husband, he wasn't home doing childcare tasks all week. So he doesn't feel the same way because he got to have his half-hour commute on the way to work every morning to have his quiet coffee in his car while he drove. Whereas to me on Saturday morning, I just want to be able to chill and have coffee. And if he's off in the house doing other stuff, I can't do that now. So it's like, what was my need in that moment? It was not for him to make pancakes.
Mm. It's interesting when we even think about needs versus expectations, right? Like and this is even part of that conversation where in some ways your partner was meeting expectation of the let's be equal partners. Let's, he's not just going to be on the couch saying, well, Renee, dishes are all you go do the dishes, you go do the recycling, you make the pancakes. So in some ways someone could argue, well, he's meeting expectation, which I think that's what a lot of people backfired on you.
Yeah.
Or not backfired, but a lot of people fired back to you, which was like, why can't you be grateful he's making pancakes? But it's the expectations are much different than needs and
Mm-hmm.
desires and wishes. And you had such a different need on Saturday morning.
Yeah. 100%.
Did he ever tell you what his internal drive was behind the 5-minute coffee, up, pancakes, up, laundry, up? Like what I don't know. I'd just be curious if you guys ever went into that.
He is an acts of service kind of person, like
Mm,
beyond. Okay. And in the majority of situations, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm so appreciative, But in some situations, like you were saying, the expectation or how he wants to provide for me or like do something for me, it doesn't match up with what my need is in that moment. So it's my responsibility to let him know instead of being grumpy and irritated and giving him attitude. We just had a conversation. And of course, to him, he was like, wait a minute, like, you don't want me to do laundry? I was like, no, like, just go sit down, please.
I
Like,
want
let
you to
me
do
go.
laundry with the 18-month-old attached to your hip
Yeah.
while I'm 2 floors above with hot coffee and
Yes.
my book and earplugs in and the door is locked.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can do the laundry and do the childcare, yes, that's what I want and need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we started to do was, and this made a world of a difference, was kind of on Friday, lay out what both of our expectations were for the weekend. And I've talked about before, like Saturday afternoons during quarantine in the summer, he would go out and mow the lawn. And I'm like, wait a minute, like I have been in the house, literally in the house all week with Milo. And now I'm back in the house, for a couple hours while he's mowing the lawn. So I like if we laid out what both of our expectations were for the weekend, like for me, you know what? I would really like to clear out my closet and bring some stuff to the donations. And like there were things around the house that I thought were a priority as well that I couldn't get done during the
Mm,
week while watching an 18-month-old.
yes.
And similarly, maybe to him, washing the car, cleaning the inside of the car is a priority. So, okay, on Friday, let's both kind of discuss like what are some things you wanted to get done this weekend? What are some things that I wanted to get done this weekend? And then what are things that we want to do together as a family so that you kind of have like a loose plan for the weekend. And so it's not just like you're blindsided, like all of a sudden he's up and out the door and mowing the lawn. And I'm like,
Mm.
I wanted to go for a walk So it's, yeah,
Which
that's kind of
then
how we,
it cascades the fight though, right? Because then he comes back inside, lawn's mowed, and he's happy. And he's like, oh, I did the thing for the house. And you're like, I want to go for a walk. And he says, well, you didn't tell me. And you're like, well, you should know, right? Like there's all of these different layers that then play out between us.
yeah.
Um, okay, so the reason why I connected so deeply with your pancake story was because of my experience with Greg. So this was before the term mental load was really hot and center on social media when my son was born. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember he would have maybe 2 days off. They often weren't on the weekends because he was mandated to work on the weekends. So doing some shift work. And I remember he'd be home, and it's so clear for me. It's like this one sunny day in the summer, and it's approaching nap time. So first, who's managing the clock? Me. I'm managing the clock. I'm looking at my son. I'm holding him. Okay, because I don't know, was he maybe 2 months at this point? And then I'm thinking, okay, so am I doing nap time? Oh, great. I have to be the holder of nap time. So I'm literally like, Greg, where are you? I can't find you. Nowhere to be found. I end up putting my son down to bed and then go back into the living room. I'm like, where is he? And then he walks by the front window. He's got his earbuds in,
Mm.
pushing the lawnmower.
Yeah. Just getting a suntan, listening to a podcast.
And I love what you said about, and I mean, in all of our growth, having children really catapults you into these conversations. I was like, what are you doing? How could you? Why are you cutting the grass of all the things? And of course, because that's his time off, he's thinking, what is my to-do list? When can I get this done? And I'm pretty sure when he came back in, he said, I saw a window, so I just thought I would get out there. And I'm pretty sure I had thought he just went out to bring out the trash or to grab something. And I expected him to come back in and so that we could share the parenting duties. But he just saw the window and took it. And I couldn't be mad at him for doing that because, like you had said, our expectations were just not clearly communicated between us. And neither one of us knew what we needed or wanted in that point.
And I don't know if you relate to this as well. It sounds like you probably will. In quarantine, I started to notice that I was always the one, like, for example, he just went outside and started cutting the grass. My husband would do the same. He would just go in the basement, start doing laundry. And I'm like, 15, 20 minutes go by and I'm like, what is like, where did he go? But on the flip side, I would never do that. Like, I would
Mm,
be like,
why not?
I'm going to go have a shower. Okay. I'll be back in like 10, 15 minutes. I have to make this big announcement to
Yeah.
the entire household that I am going to be leaving the room and I am not going to be watching Milo. And this is when I shall return. So, you know what I mean? And whereas he never felt the need to do that. Now, I'm not saying this is a him problem. This is likely a me problem because when I brought that to his attention, he was like, yeah, but you could do that. Like, obviously, I'm going to be watching our
Yeah.
child. You know what I mean? And
It is again that she felt parent though. It is the internalized beliefs that we grow up having. And these are often messages that we don't even know that we've received. But
mhm.
maybe we saw it on I mean, we definitely saw it on TV. Have you and Milo watched
No.
Sing? No? Oh, add it to the list. It's such a cute one. It's so cute. But there's this like perfect example of the two pigs. They're actually the animals, and the mental load is so blaring right there. And it is this daddy pig who like comes in numb every day, puts down his briefcase and falls asleep on his wife and has no idea that she's even gone
Mm.
joining this concert. And I'm losing my train of thought. But okay, so it's just this internalized belief. Nobody ever said to us, you have to always be with the kids. But we get this message from watching shows, from society, from our parents, but also even biologically, right? Because
Mhm.
we had that protection with our baby for 9 months. We were always the ones there watching. So, in some ways, I think there's like this evolutionary biological perspective there of you are
Oh, for
always
sure.
there. So I love that you bring that up, Renee, because what's interesting is that you have the quarantine experience and the pandemic with you, and I don't, as having both of my children. They were born beforehand. And with my first, I remember struggling to do that. I would say, hey, you on? Because I want to go have a shower. And then when my second, so the experience is the same, even though you were during the pandemic and I was not with our first. With my second, I actually learned to become, I called myself the shower ninja. And Greg would be like, "Did you have a shower?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I did." He's like, "Oh, like you didn't tell me." I'm like, "I saw a window and I left." And I think because
Yeah.
at that point we had started to have those conversations of, I'm not going to be the default parent here. I'm going to see that you're there and I'm going to sneak away because we're both responsible. Of course, that depends on age and context and who's doing what
Yeah.
at what point. But I think that is such a common experience that somehow we have to ask permission to go do what we want, but our partners don't.
Hmm. I know. That's when I started to, I remember the first TikTok that I made, and it was like highlighting that. It was like me pretending to be my husband, and just like when my husband has to go pee, like he just like gets up and goes. And then it was like when I have to go pee, I'm like telling everybody, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. And yeah, since then, like it's something that I have to be aware of and I work on it. And now that Milo's 4, to be honest, it's like a whole new life because he can just be independent, and it like I can go have a shower while he's watching a show on my bed, or like
Mm-hmm.
it's like a different world now. But back then, not so much.
I know something that people will commonly say to me is, I don't know how to communicate this with my partner. And I'm curious how that unfolded for you guys because it takes two people and it also takes
Yeah.
how you decide to show up in that moment.
So I've always been one to think things through before I bring something to him. So I'm not reactive in the moment. I'm very self-aware. So I used to give the example of being grumpy when he would come home from work in quarantine. Even though I wanted him to come home, then all of a sudden he would come home and I was like, why am I so irritated? Um, I never react in the moment. I don't like give him attitude or anything. I usually try and figure out why I feel that way. And usually it's something that seems really simple, but it can feel awkward, or like it's awkward to bring it up in conversation because it's like with the pancake thing on Saturday morning, it was hard for me to verbalize like, I don't want you to make pancakes. Well, why?
Mm.
Because I don't want to watch Milo, like be the only one watching Milo, because again, it triggers this thing that's like, I shouldn't be saying this. Like, I should just, you know? So my
This piece
husband is,
around, I should be grateful though, right? Like I should be happy with what you're doing.
yeah. Yeah. And so it can be difficult as a woman, just in the first place, to express a need. Like, just that is extremely difficult. And most of us are people pleasers. And, it's all of this stuff that we have to kind of break through and just be honest. And for me, my husband is super receptive to things that I say, and he can see it. Like once you explain it, he can understand like, oh, okay. And then you can kind of work on how to make changes. But it can be hard to bring it up, especially if you have been doing the same thing like day in and day out, and you've just kind of like built up resentment, like you've let it get to be like a little bit out of
Mm.
hand, or it's grown like the
Yes.
issue. Then I can see where it would be difficult, and it's going to be a shock maybe to them, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And when it comes to resentment, we don't get to just, the key to tackle that is you can't just kind of whoa, let the whole, like the pot of boiling water explode all over the kitchen or the pot of sauce, right? Like, we can't do that. And we can't go to our partners then saying, like, I resent you that you go to work every day and right. Like that also doesn't feel good and move us forward. And it's those smaller pieces of being able to offload these pieces, whether it's about finding a way to meet your own need or having them step in to meet some of that as well. And I think I'm really glad you brought that up because I know so many people feel really stuck in terms of, where do I go from here? It's been so long. I've been conditioned to please others and care for others and put my needs last. And even just that simple piece right there of just pause your partner gets home, you're grumpy and annoyed, just instead of, snapping at them or making a snide comment or whatever it is, just pause and be really curious about what's happening there for you. And sometimes that pausing doesn't mean you're even going to talk about it that day, but
Mm-hmm.
then letting it unfold and seeing what's going on for you. And because I think something that you did really well there, Renee, is like you talked about your experience. Like, this is me. It's not like you're so awful. How dare you make pancakes of
Yes.
all
And this
the
is how,
things.
like, whenever I talk about these things on social media, you often get met with
Mhm.
things like that. Like, for example, oh, like I was irritated when he would come home from work. Whoa, what? You don't want him to work? Then you go work then. And it's like, okay, like back it up. I'm not saying that I want our situation to change. I'm not saying that it should be different. I understand why our situation is the way it is. He's a surgeon. I just finished school. Like, I get why we're in this situation.
Mhm.
I don't want it to change. All I'm doing is explaining how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. And perhaps there's a way that we can make small changes to alleviate that, and so that both of our needs are being met and we're both happy, Like, people always like to like
It's the because you're hitting on some internalized shame from the other person. And so I always say to people, separate it out, right? That your partner has a feeling and need. It's not about you. It's not about your worthiness, right? Like, so you go to your husband and you're like, I don't want you to make pancakes because holy crap, I really need some time for me. He doesn't, well, this is what tends to happen in our relationships, right? The other partner says, oh, so what? I'm a bad partner. Oh, I can never get anything right for you, right? Oh, you just make breakfast. Forget it. I'm out of here. And like they storm out, right? And you're like, wait a minute, hang on. What just happened there? Like I just didn't want pancakes. I wanted to have 10 minutes of coffee with my
I
book
know.
and whatever. And now he thinks I'm a bad part. Now he thinks I'm saying I'm a bad, like, no, hang on, right? And we need to separate those pieces, your
I
partner. And
know.
like, so if this lands in the other person's ears by chance, this message is for you, that if your partner comes to you and says, I need help with the dishes, I don't want you to make pancakes, please, can you, do whatever it is, let me mow the lawn, right? I'm not saying anything about your worthiness and your enoughness. Like, you're good. And I have needs.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's 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 shocking. And often, like, I talk a lot about these really like nuanced situations that where like I feel irritated. For example, perfect example, the reel I just posted about my husband like getting ready to leave the house and he's like, do you need anything from Walmart?
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to Walmart. And that
And
is
I know
not
I know
a
this one.
him.
Yeah.
And so the whole, like, if people haven't seen it, the whole point of it was like, I get so irritated in a situation like that and stressed out because I feel like I have to mentally scan the entire house, the fridge, what do we need from Walmart? Because this is the last time we will ever get to go to Walmart ever in our whole life. Like, that's what it feels like to me. So
Or it'll be
again,
so hard for you to get there that you won't,
exactly.
right? Yeah, like you've got to like do it perfectly.
I
Scan the
need
house perfectly.
everything.
Do not
Yeah.
forget anything.
And so I made just quickly a TikTok, a reel about that situation, how irritated it makes me and stressed out. And people, like, again, this is I wouldn't expect my husband to not ask me if I needed anything. Like, that's just the right thing to do. I do it to him all the time. Like, I'm at
Mhm.
Foodland or wherever, do you need anything?
Mhm.
That's not the thing. This is a me problem. But so many people want to be like, "Oh my god," like, and completely blame him or think that I'm like a toxic person, like, what's the matter with you? Like, you're so negative. And I'm like, this is just a nuanced human experience, and like I am being very self-aware and understanding why that question stresses me out. It's
Mm.
not his fault. It's just,
You
this
weren't
is what's
putting
happening.
fault.
And And this is why. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, we're just living life in the world. And this is something that happens
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't putting fault on him. Like he shouldn't ask you, how dare he? It was my experience is I get so annoyed and irritated at this, which is a completely different message, right? And
Yeah.
it's interesting. The reels you put out are so relatable, um, because we all experience it in some way. It's the humanness that connects all of us,
Hmm.
right? That the reality is there's often one person, often the female, who holds the mental load and is working 90 hours a week, right? Like we see that from the research with the second shift and all of the things. And so a benign question that is well intentioned from your partner is just hitting on the reality that you have, um I want to say like a well of unmet needs, but I don't think that's quite right. It's more of like this overwhelming backpack bursting at the seams of bricks on top of you. And that
Hmm.
small little question is just one more thing, right? It's
Yes.
actually Greg had asked me something the other night. He's like, "Oh, where's the?" And I just looked at him. He's like, "I will go find it.
Hmm.
Thank you." Because he caught himself, right? Which is it's an innocent, often not malicious behavior of being a team. So I think what you're trying to say there is acknowledging the me part and how I'm annoyed at it, but then coming to it as a we solution,
Hmm.
which could be, I had commented on that reel of yours saying like, yes, we use, well, actually what we used to do is we would like be like, I'm just throwing it out into the universe that we're all out of tinfoil. And then like whoever was doing whatever at the time was like, what did they throw out to the universe again? That was not effective because our brain power and the number of times we're going to the grocery store and oh, we forgot tinfoil. Does a neighbor have it? But we use, it's called Google Keep now, and other people were saying like, yes, I can just say, hey Google, add tinfoil
Yeah.
to the list. Which I mean, yeah, we sometimes need systems. And then the other piece that you had said earlier, I think we should really hit on it, is that Fridays you both meet and say, what does it look like this weekend? Which is eliminating unmet expectations and also
Yes.
operating your relationship like a really good team. Think of how many
Hmm.
times we meet with our business partners all the time, every
Yeah.
week.
Yeah. Like, what are we doing this week? Like, what's on the schedule? Instead of just waking up Saturday morning and you both have these expectations for Saturday that don't jive. And now
Mm-hmm.
someone's going to be upset, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, definitely
Yeah,
recommend.
just finding that way to come together, right? So how can we then have this meeting? And I think sometimes what people will often say when I talk about have a daily meeting with your partner or a weekly meeting, they'll say, oh no, my partner's never on board for that. They don't want to. It doesn't have to be this formal, I have, agenda items A through Z today, but rather, um, what's your wish for this weekend? And you're just kind of, maybe you're finishing the dishes or you're sitting down before you turn on your favorite show and just put it out loud so that you can both. And what I like about that, Renee, and it's so important, is that you get to see a little bit of the inside of that person rather than some point on the weekend they're like, oh, I got to run out to get XYZ. And you're like, but I thought that I'd get out for my walk and that I was going to do the
Hmm.
thing now and sort through the clothes, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Now you can make a plan like, oh, we're going to run to Walmart. Well, why don't we all go for lunch before that? And then we'll stop at Walmart when we're done. It's like, just becomes so much more efficient. Even now, like I started going to Pilates. So my husband always has to go to the hospital Saturday mornings. So we make a point, like I'll go to the earlier class. If he has to go to the hospital, then I'll come home. He can go to the hospital, come back. And then it's like just having a plan so everybody can get things done that they want to get done and you can do things as a family.
Yeah, that plan and flexibility. I'm thinking of the other. So one of my mental load reels took off both on TikTok and Instagram. And it's like when your partner asks you, how can I help? Which is similar to the, do you need anything at
Mm-hmm.
Walmart? Right. And the comment that often came back was like, oh, I could never do it right, or I can't get it perfect, or, um, Yeah. And just this, a lot of stuff just gets thrown in there. I lost my train of thought. Did you
Was this
catch?
from men, the comments
Yeah.
from men? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's like that's like another mental load thing that people talk about a lot. Like, how can I help? And you don't necessarily want to have to delegate tasks. You want someone that is an equal partner. Because once you're now delegating what you want someone to do, there's another thing under your like umbrella of, now you're managing another person. And oftentimes I think moms would just be like, oh, it's easier for me to just do it than to sit here and explain how to do it, which is why I always say, if you can't up and leave your house for like 3 days
Mm-hmm.
and your partner can just like, step into your role and take over, then there's a problem.
Yes.
And I remember I got this comment the other day. It was around this situation. And that's what I was saying. She was like, sometimes with our schedules, it was about being the default parent with our schedules and his work and blah, blah, blah. Like, I do most of the childcare tasks because that's just what works for our family situation. And I was like, I get that. I'm in a similar situation. When my husband's here, it's 50-50, but he works a lot. So oftentimes, like I drive Milo to school every day. Like I do some things every day. But the difference is I can leave, and I have left. Like I was away for 10 days in November. I did not do one thing to prepare for me leaving. I packed my suitcase and I went to LA for 10 days, and my husband did everything. So he can easily step into my shoes,
Mm-hmm.
and like a lot of people say, like, well, he does, shovels the driveway, he does the yard stuff, he does this, and I do all like the childcare stuff. Perfect. But if he were to up and leave, you could easily step into his role.
Yes.
It doesn't, it's not
Yes.
rocket appliances to like shovel a driveway and do that stuff. Like we can easily step into their role.
Mm.
Can they step into your role? Do they know the children's routines? Do they know what they eat? Do they know, like, do they make their meals, give them bath time, bedtime? Like, can they comfort them when they're upset? Like, that's the important piece. Like, can they step into your shoes? So that's my spiel on that.
I think so. I asked Greg to teach me how to mow the lawn before kids,
Yes,
actually, before
me
I turned
too.
30. Before I turned 30, I said, I feel like this is the life skill I need in my 20s. We grew up in a family where my father didn't want his two
Same.
daughters to mow the lawn, right? So, okay, we didn't. But it felt like the life skill for the reason of if Greg were to ever leave for an X amount of time and the grass is starting to get a little long and the neighbors are walking by, right? But I love that you said that, because you also said something in there that I want to repeat, which is when he's here, it's 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this respect that you show up, that we're both contributing in here. It's not I worked all week and I brought
Mm-hmm.
home all the money. So then, therefore, when I get home, I'm not going to parent. I drank from that cup, but I'm not going to pick it up because I don't do dishes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
and this is one of the common struggles that I see heterosexual couples bump into, which is that like we get into this like ego of whose work is more important and who is
Mm-hmm.
doing the heavier lift and who is more tired, rather than being collaborative, rather than being a team and being flexible. And I just had to repeat that to you. I don't know if you caught yourself saying that, like when he's here, it's 50-50.
Mm-hmm. And like
Yeah.
the team thing, perfect example. I wasn't sleeping at all last week. I had a night where I barely slept, and every once in a while I would story on Instagram and I was like, WTF, like, why am I still awake? And it was like 2 a.m, whatever. My husband got up the next morning. He probably watched my stories, saw that I didn't sleep. He made Milo's lunch. He made Milo's breakfast. I had turned off my alarm. So I like stroll downstairs at 8 a.m. and everything's done because he
Oh,
knew that I didn't sleep. And I was like, what a gem of a human. Like, That is teamwork. Like I
Yes.
usually every day make Milo's lunch, give him breakfast. I do all that while my husband's getting ready for work.
Mm.
But on this one day, like I didn't sleep. I was a mess. I was a zombie. He filled in. Like that is teamwork, you know? So,
That is an incredible example of teamwork, of turning towards you, of like seeing in that moment, oh, I looked at your stories. Oh, I saw you didn't sleep. You always have a choice in those moments. I could turn away and do nothing and, oh, good luck. Hey, don't forget to wake up, right? I'm leaving. He could turn towards you unkindly, which is like, I can't believe you slept in. I have to make the lunches now. But instead he turns towards you, right? That's what the Gottmans talk about. Turn towards your partner, see what they're struggling with, have
yeah.
compassion, and just, you would do that for your teammate if you saw them struggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what happens is
Oh.
in couples, they build up resentment towards each other. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't like these acts of service and like being kind and like a teammate, like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of goes out the window. And so it just snowballs.
Yes. So now I'm like, okay, let's find our action points. Our action points here would be one, find some small need to carve out today or tomorrow, whenever you listen to this episode, carve out a small need. And I like to remind women, mostly women listeners, that if your partner's upset that you're going to go and take the shower, that's okay. They're allowed to be upset and you're allowed to take your shower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you say? What's that action?
To try and not feel guilt. And like
Mm-hmm.
I still struggle with this. For example, if I'm like like I was having a really bad day, really bad evening, and my husband was like, just go downstairs. Like, don't worry about bath time, bedtime, like just go downstairs. So usually I wouldn't because I feel guilty. I feel like I have to be there. Like it's odd for me to just go into another room, go down in the basement, start watching a show when I know my husband is upstairs, like doing bath time and bedtime. Like that's really hard for me. But that is something that I would stress to people to work on is
Mm-hmm.
like you just said, go and do it and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always have to remind myself of that. So I did end up going downstairs, but I was like, okay, like I'm just going to watch my show. Like this is okay. Like I'm having a difficult day. This is okay. Yeah.
It's the idea of doing something so many times that the discomfort ends up dissipating over time, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we need to do
Yeah.
to work through guilt, to ride through it instead of listening to it, which continues to feed into it. Because every time you say, no, no, I'll stay up here. And I used to do that, Renee. I used to, do the self-sacrifice, martyr myself and be like, no, I'll stay up here. No, okay. Oh, you're doing bedtime. But then I'd clean the dishes and then I'd change the sheets and then I'd fold the laundry. And then I'm just as exhausted rather than giving yourself that full permission of, okay, I'm good. I can do this. I feel guilty and I can still do this.
Yeah.
Mm,
And everything's going to be fine.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.